Welcome to the Australian Hiker Podcast, Australia's longest running hiking podcast, downloaded over 750,000 times in over 160 countries and providing you with an Australian perspective on all things hiking. We're your hosts, Tim and Jules Savage, coming to you from Ngunnawal and Ngambri country.
There is no end to hiking guidebooks on the market these days, but one question I get asked from time to time is, which trails can my dog accompany me on a hike? Strangely enough, from an Australian perspective, books that discuss dog-friendly walks are in short supply. In today's episode, episode 245, we look at the newly released Sydney-based guidebook that helps you get out on trail with your canine friend. We hope you enjoy. Before we get into today's episode, if you'd like to help support Australian Hiker and this podcast, there are a couple of ways that you can help us out. Firstly, by subscribing on your podcast host of choice so that each episode is available as soon as it's published, and if you have the opportunity, leave us a 5-star review. Another way to support us is go to the Australian Hiker website at www.australianhiker.com.au and click on the Support Us page and buy us a coffee. You can do a one-off donation or become a monthly supporter. All donations are greatly appreciated and help us to continue producing this podcast and blog. Now let's get on to today's episode. In episode 204, we touch base with Andrew Grune and Evie O, authors of the book Dog Trip Sydney 52 Nature Adventures. Today we catch back up with them again about their newest book, Dog Trip Sydney 52 Dog-Friendly Nature Adventures, to find out about dog-friendly walks in the Sydney region. Okay, Evie, Andrew, welcome back to the Australian Hiker Podcast to talk about your new book, Dog Trip Sydney, 52 Dog-Friendly Nature Adventures.
Hello, thanks for having us.
Not a problem.
Thanks for having us.
All right, now before we talk about the book, Dog Trip Sydney, give us a brief introduction to yourselves, your general background, and a bit about your hiking resume.
So my background is in photography. I'm a photographer, and when it comes to hiking, I guess I've been hiking most of my life, but it's kind of really ramped up in the last couple of years as we've been writing these books. And I think Evie and I would both agree we love to do hikes that have kind of a big reward at the end, so like a waterfall or a tunnel or ruins.
And my background is I run a design studio focusing in publications and brands, and I'm also an artist. I haven't done many hikes. Well, now I've done quite a lot, but I grew up in Indonesia in a very urban-like environment. So my connection to nature wasn't that natural in the beginning. But then I moved to Australia when I was 17, and it took me about 9 years, I think, since I did my first bushwalk, believe it or not. And since then, I'm hooked. And before writing this book, I would just do bushwalks, and the longer the better sometimes, because then, you just kind of de-stress from urban situations, I guess. And we both of us met just before COVID, and because there were not many dating destination options, that's kind of how this project came about, because we realized that, we actually love road trips and we love being in nature. And, that's what that's kind of how we got here.
How often do you take your dog hiking with you?
As much as possible, really. He suffers from a big case of separation anxiety, and so do I.
And me too.
Yeah, so we don't like to leave him anywhere, but obviously we can't bring him on every walk, because in New South Wales you can't bring pets into national parks. So that is kind of one of the main reasons this book came around, because we didn't want him missing out, really.
And your dog's name's Henry, is it?
Yes, his name is Henry. Henry the Whippet.
Yeah, I was going to say I think they're fairly high energy sort of dogs, aren't they? So I'm sure he'd appreciate getting out and about as much as he possibly can.
Yeah, he gets the
I mean,
zoomies.
you'll be surprised that whippets, even though they look so athletic, and they are athletic dogs, they're actually quite lazy. Like daily we do, like he just runs like 10 minutes and that's it. But he does love bushwalks because, like, obviously maybe urban dogs also have forgotten what it's like to live really, in like wild nature. And I feel like that's what he's like when we're on bushwalks. He's like sniffing everything, eating everything, which could be bad, but also, yeah, like I feel like he's become a new version of him when he's out in nature, and it's quite nice to see.
But it's also quite funny when we're on a deadline and we kind of have to really ramp up the bushwalks. When we might do like 5 in 3 or 4 days or something. Like he's not so excited to get out of the car, and he doesn't run around as much. He kind of sticks by our side, which is kind of funny.
Yeah,
I don't know if it's animal cruelty, but I think it's fine.
All right, now let's talk about your new book. So, Dog Trip Sydney, 52 dog-friendly nature adventures. What made you decide to write this book about walking with dogs?
Yeah, well, it really came back to what Andrew mentioned before. Like, obviously, my love for Henry is very big, and they say animals have unconditional love. I think I do too with him. And I remember just feeling as sad as him when we go out and he's alone at home. And also another reason was, like, when we did our first book, Day Trip Sydney, it was very, very, very hard to curate the options to curation into 52 trips. And a lot of walks in Dog Trip Sydney were kind of like, it's not even a deal list because they were good. We just had to kind of like not include them in book one. And I thought, well, if they couldn't be included there, why don't we include them in book two? And then we just kind of like, I guess, found more dog friendly walks, and that goes, the rest is kind of like it.
Now, this book lists 52 walking adventures where you can take your canine companion, all within 120 kilometres of the Sydney city centre, and each is able to be done with a single day. Why 52 walks, and how did you go about choosing the walks that you have?
It's actually a funny, well, it's not funny, it's a quite cruel, actually, story. Because, and this is like, I guess this is what it's like to be working with a publishing house. And when I say cruel, it's all positive, obviously. The initial proposal for this series was actually 30 to 35 walks instead of 52. But then when our publisher put together this pitch and then presented it to acquisition meeting, the one very clever person said, why don't we up the number to 52? So that's one for every week of the year. I mean, it does sound good, but then it also doubled our workload. But having said that, it's good and bad. I guess, like, we're also forced to kind of like work harder on our research and find places that might not just be the obvious, because like, I guess, like, hiking guides it's not a new idea, but like when working with Thames and Hudson, we would really focus on how to create a modern, like, or like a refreshed version of what has been done in the past, and hopefully we delivered.
I must admit, I think when I started looking at preparing for this podcast and also doing a review of the book, which will be released at the same time as this podcast, I actually struggled to find many dog walking guidebooks. There seem to be a lot overseas, but Australia seemed to be a bit light on. And I'm sure there are websites and the occasional book around, but it did surprise me, given how many of us actually own dogs, that there wasn't already a number of books in this sort of category.
Yeah, we were really surprised as well when we did our research. That there are a few books out there, but they're kind of more like a list of like dog parks and kind of places where you can take your dog. And I think we really did see a gap in the market. Yeah, and hopefully we took advantage of that.
All right.
I guess maybe that made me the craziest dog lady in the whole Australia.
Now, just sort of finishing off that last question, I mean, and you've already touched on this. How did you go about choosing the walks that you have? And you did mention you wanted some of the walks with some payoffs like waterfalls and things like that. But given that you're taking a dog on this walk and it's not just about you, it's about the dog, how did you sort of select the walks in that respect?
Well, there's that as well, but also with dogs, I guess we have to be quite thoughtful about how easy a trek would be. You know, like we think about, could a small dog do this? You know, is it big dogs only? Like all those things, I guess, are additionals when you're running a hiking guides for dogs instead of just humans. And then in a way, safety is probably, not that I'm saying that the, like humans are less prone to accidents or something, but, dogs can be really silly. Like they could just zoom and then just like jump up. So like, yeah, all those things we kind of consider when we choose things. And obviously, we thought the challenge with this dog book is actually not being able to access any of national parks, which is, obvious, but also how can we find epic walks that are also fun for the humans who are going there? Like it's not just a mere dog park or like a short trail, like the humans have to have fun too. So with all this involved, in a way, maybe the curation of book 2 have more tick boxes compared to book 1.
And we also, in this book, we thought about when people, want to take a dog for a walk, it might be also like not like a 10-kilometer type situation. It might just be a few kilometers that they could drive to before or after work. So a lot of them, we tried to make quite a mix of some that are quite close to the city and some that are very far away. I think more so in this book than the previous one, where a lot of the walks were kind of, an entire day trip.
Yeah, I think looking at the list of walks in through here, there's a good range of walks from those sort of just under a kilometre to, I think the longest one is just under 10 kilometres. But there's a lot of 3 and 4 and 5 kilometre walks, which is, as you say, for a smaller dog or a less active dog, is probably not a bad sort of distance as a maximum.
For sure. When we did the Kiama walk with Henry, he it was quite a hot day, and he took about 4/5 of the way through. He just gave up, and he's a very clean dog, and he never sits on the floor. He prefers carpet, but he just lay down on the floor and he refused to walk. And I put him in my backpack for the rest of the walk, which was poor little guy.
Yeah, well, that's not a bad thing when you've got a smaller dog, as long as you don't have a Great Dane or something. They're a bit harder to carry.
Yeah, that'd be much harder to carry. True.
All right, now, as co-authors of this book, what role did you each play in putting it together? So, and this sort of goes back to your previous book. I think you each had defined roles, and what were they?
So Evie does a lot of the research, kind of putting together the list, because I'm a terribly unorganized person and I'm terrible at homework. So Evie does a lot of that, and then we kind of edit down that list together, and I do the photography. Evie, as a very talented book designer, she designs the book, and then we do the maps together. And when it comes to writing, we write together as well. Evie kind of drafts it out, and then I flourish it. So it's quite a production, but we've got it down. We've got it down to a fine art at this stage.
Now, just that sort of raises the issue of the photos. I mean, you always try and get the best photos you can, whether it's a book for dogs or a book for humans. And this one's obviously got a lot of photos with a lot of dogs in it, which I must admit is something I'm not used to looking at hiking guidebooks. when you're just dealing with the landscapes or people, you can ask someone to say, just stand there and look this way. How do you go about how do you go about doing the photos with dogs and getting them in the right spot to get the good photos?
Well, luckily with Henry, he's he's a natural model. He'll just walk up the track, and then we'll say Henry, and he'll turn around and do his Zoolander blue steel moment. And other times it's just luck and speed. You always have to be ready for the moment where dogs are doing something incredible. But luckily, dogs are great subjects because they're always having fun. So it's kind of it's hard to take a bad photo of a dog, I think. But I think the skill is getting that right moment, and that's just a matter of being ready all the time.
Oh trips. Yes, sometimes we do bring friends with dogs on trips because on the more adventurous or like obscure destinations, we were not liking the chance of Henry having a friend, and that was actually one of the briefs that our publisher gave us, like make this book look like a dog party. And actually that brings us to a very interesting artistic decision of taking out all humans out of this book.
That's the most important bit. I don't know if you noticed, Tim, but there's no people in the book whatsoever. So we kind of imagined an alternate reality where these dogs were going on all these adventures without their owners, and I had to Photoshop a lot of people out of every single photo. It was a lot of work.
I must admit, now you mention it, I don't think, as I said, when looking through the book, I didn't see a person, but I just didn't think about it. It just seemed natural that's what you're looking at. Okay, now, like the previous book, Day Trip Sydney, which is your hiking version of this book is set out very well and is easy to follow with little distinct icons on the trail maps. What made you choose the particular information that you're providing in each of these walks?
That was actually kind of like we workshopped that with our publisher at Thames and Hudson and our book editor as well. Like, I guess we could have gone deeper or we could have gone lighter, but we thought, we should, like the idea of Day Trip is, well, I guess the original conception of the series was done during COVID, and it's meant to, a day trip is meant to be an escape, and we want it to be easy. So we deliberately, didn't include too much information of like, turn left and right, or like there will be a hill here and there. Like we're leaving out those, I guess, information that are usually apparent in other books. For the walkers to kind of enjoy it on the spot and leave a lot of room of surprise when it comes to seeing like to them enjoying the walk. We did include elevation because we thought if somebody's not up for a big hike, they shouldn't go on a high climb walk. And the facilities were actually a very, I guess, clever decision because when we don't have children, and all we thought about like, okay, we'll just go with our dogs, that's it. But then our publishers like, what about toddlers? What about people with wheels? So they really they've guided us into the inclusion of good information, I guess, and that's all credit to them.
I must admit, thinking back to the previous book and looking at this one, in some respects, the table of contents has been slightly simplified, which I don't mind actually, because you're talking about East CBD, North, South, and West. So you pick a region, and then looking at the little the list at the front. And something I hadn't actually thought about here is you identify whether the walks are on leash or off leash or both, which I hadn't really thought about because, not having had a dog for a few years, I always tend to think, well, the dog's always going to be on a leash, but there certainly are walks where you can let them off leash.
Yes.
So yeah, no, I think that's very good, and I did love the little logos. So the little logos saying, that they're very cute little logos. They're easy to follow, and they just make it a very simple, enjoyable book to read.
Yeah, and those logos, believe it or not, they were tested against a few Thames and Hudson personnels just to make sure they're legit, because we're kind of like, well, not reinventing the wheel, but they don't look like the other usual logos. It's not like stick people. And if you see it, actually,
they are stick people.
yeah. But if you no. But what I'm saying is, if you look really closely, the stick people wear a half skirt as well. So it's what I'm trying to say is we're trying to be current with how our icons are designed as well.
Yeah, no, I think they're quite nice. You get so used to seeing the stock standard things that's used in just about every guidebook, but I think I've actually found these ones a bit easier in some respect, and it's you actually paid attention to them, whereas the other ones you just tended to ignore.
Yeah.
Yeah, we try not to inundate people with too much data, and we kind of have a phrase for the kind of our target book buyer, and we say that they're the casual adventurer.
Yeah.
So when we design it, we kind of have that in mind.
All right. Now, do you, or for that matter, Henry, have a favourite adventure out of the 52 listed in the book?
I can't speak for him, but he was really happy when he did the cover book that was from Manly Dam. Yeah, and you will think, right, Manly Dam, that's really not romantic, but it's absolutely beautiful there. It's good because there are a lot of different terrains for him to enjoy. There's some hilly bits, waterfalls, some bushy stuff. There are easy platform walks as well, because sometimes dogs just like it easy as well. Yeah, I think he quite enjoyed that. What do you think, Andrew?
I think he loved them all, except Kayama. I think I can't say what his favorite walk was, but I think I know his least favorite walk. But but he really enjoyed the beginning of Kayama.
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
for sure.
So in other words, you probably recommend starting off with the shorter walks to start with and seeing what your dogs are happy with?
I mean, just as with yourself, right? You got to know your limits and your dog's limits.
Okay, so where to next? Do you have another book on the horizon?
We have 2 more books on the horizon. So last winter we moved to Melbourne with Henry, and we did about 100 walks in the Melbourne region. And so we've got Day Trip Melbourne coming out just before spring, I think, and then Dog Trip Melbourne just after Christmas, I think. And we are also scheming with our publisher on doing some more books, hopefully on an island down south.
All right, now that'll be good. That'll be good. It's sort of it's always hard. I mean, when you're an author producing a series of books, it's not as if you can do them all in 1 year. And I think covering Sydney and then now Melbourne, that will give a fairly good chunk of the population that tends to fall into that category. So I think the Melbourne books will do well also. Okay, so we've been talking with authors Evie O and Andrew Grune about Dog Trip Sydney, 52 dog-friendly nature adventures. Andrew, Evie, thank you for your time.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Tim.
Okay, so that was our interview with authors Evie O and Andrew Grune on their second guidebook, Dog Trip Sydney, 52 dog-friendly hiking adventures or nature adventures. And this is certainly a very different sort of guidebook than what we've done before, because we traditionally focus on guidebooks for people who are walking, whether it be in a rural or an urban or a wilderness setting. But in this case here, we're looking at walks that are designed to take your canine friend on.
Yeah, and it's a really interesting idea. I mean, we do see lots of people wanting to take their dogs on hikes with them, but not sure where they can. And those who do put a lot of planning and a lot of effort into making sure their dogs are safe. So this is a nice book. It's a little bit different from the normal guidebook because you can get this really strong sense that this is about the dog. This is not about the obsessive compulsive human who wants to do all of that planning. I'm thinking about Tim now, and I think Evie was saying, it's not about turn right here, turn right there. It's about exploring, and it's about taking your canine friend somewhere where they can explore. And the guidebook is written in that way, and it really comes across.
And I think they're actually saying as well, this book is designed for the average person. It's not designed for the hardcore hiker. I mean, there are some good-looking walks in here. And I'll be honest, if I'm going for a walk, I don't want to have 30 other people who happen to be walking, let alone walking with their dog. So it may be that I don't necessarily pick these walks to do myself. But there are a lot of people out there who do want to go walking with their dogs. And as Andrew and Evie mentioned, their dog almost becomes a different sort of individual when presented with a natural environment, lots of new smells, lots of things to eat that they may not necessarily should be eating, but being typical dogs, that's what they tend to do. So I think it's an excellent book in that respect. The other thing as well is that, and again, if you listen to the interview, that they mentioned there are no pictures of people in these books. Mm-hmm. And it's something that I missed when I looked through this book and looked through the images and looked through the what was there. It didn't occur to me that there weren't people. There just happened to be photos of lots of dogs. And in fact, apart from a book on dog breeds, I don't think I've seen a book with pictures of so many dogs in one place before.
Yeah, and in a way, Andrew demystified this by talking about the photoshopping that he had to do to get, I think it was probably more the occasional human out of the way. But the images are lovely, and some of them are really playful, and it does give you this sense of, this is something that you could do with your dog, and you could have a good time, and the dog would have a good time, and they might meet some other little friends along the way.
The things that really stood out for me with this book, I mean, I had a look at the Day Trip Sydney, the hiking version of this book, and it's not an overly complex book. They keep things fairly simple, but in relation, the table of contents is quite short on this book. And that's not a bad thing, because it really does talk about, dog talks about hiking with dogs 101. It talks about the locations of where the walks are, and it really does come down to east CBD, west, north and south. And if you're looking at a walk, depending on what part of Sydney you're on or what part you want to travel to, you can say, okay, I want to go out to Western Sydney today, and you look at the west section and see where those walks had happened to be located. So that's actually a good thing there.
And the other thing I liked was that there's a combination of shorter and longer walks, depending on, how much time you had available, depending on, I guess, your skill with you and your dog out in a semi-bush. It's not isolated bush environment. So, I think there's something in there for everyone. And, I think there is a little bit of an appetite for people to get out there and, share some of these experiences with their best friend.
The other thing I really like was the use of the icons, and they're not the traditional icons you see in just about every guidebook worldwide. They've gone through and created their own icons, and as they said, they're not
puppy icons.
Yeah, they're not trying to recreate the wheel here, but the icons are quite cute and they're very descriptive. So they really are a good little introduction to what's going on. From my perspective, this is an excellent book. It's a resource that was sorely missing. And while you can actually go online to type in dog-friendly walks in the Sydney region, not everyone necessarily wants to use the internet, and not everyone actually has access to the internet, and they want to be able to take a book with them and say, what's in this area, and they can have a look when they're on the spot. I mean, the book itself's not that heavy, so it's easy to throw into a pack, providing you don't have your dog in there as well, which Andrew mentioned in one of his stories.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Okay, now just to finish off, they did actually mention that they're already working on their next projects, and that's Day Trip Melbourne and Dog Trip Melbourne, due for release late in 2023 and early 2024. And I think that was one of my criticisms, I suppose. It's okay, it's lovely to have books about Sydney, but what about the rest of the country? And I think these Sydney books probably cover 5, 6, 7 million population, by the area they cover. Adding Melbourne in, you're probably picking up a fair chunk of Australia's population. They are looking again at what the next step is after the Melbourne book release. So I think this is one thing that they're working their way through the main population centres, trying to identify walks that suit just the average hiker and the dog as well. And I think this will turn out to be quite a good series as it progresses along.
It's clear that they're passionate about walking with their dog and walking with other dogs, and it's great to see that they're putting this effort into producing these books, and I think a lot of people are going to get a lot of value out of them. So, I think it'd be nice to get out there and support them in their endeavour.
Just before we finish off, at the same time this podcast has been released, there'll also be a full book review released at the same time, and the link for that will be in the show notes. Or again, you can just go onto the Australian Hiker website to the gear section and just search for books and you'll come across it as well. So again, if you want to see some images of this book and some examples of the information you'll find, that's a good place to go, including links on where you can find this book if you're interested in it. Okay, that's all for me. I hope you've enjoyed. Bye for now.
And bye from me. Welcome to the Australian Hiker Podcast, Australia's longest running hiking podcast, downloaded over 750,000 times in 100. Welcome to the Australian Hiker Podcast, Australia's longest running hiking podcast, downloaded over 750,000 times in over 160 countries and providing you with an Australian perspective on all things hiking. We're your hosts, Tim and Dulce.
The icons are quite cute